Hi, this is Cheryl McQueen, designer with Bello's Designs. My tutorial today was inspired by a Pinterest post back in 2019 by Bridget, and I'm sorry I don't know her last name, it wasn't on the post. I've made a few changes to it to create this really lovely layered purple lily. So let's get started with this card project, which is a slimline card. Let's look at the supplies first to see what we're going to be using today. To start out with, we're going to use some of the multifarious Smooth and Supreme cardstock. This is cut for the base piece to 6 3/4 inches by 3 inches. And then we're going to use a scrap piece that is big enough to use our stamp on. I have actually cut this one to be about 6.5 inches by 3 inches, something like that, out of a piece of scrap cardstock that I had. We will be using a frame around our card. I just took a piece of white cardstock and I have cut that to be 7 inches by 3 1/4 inches. To create the base for our card, I took a piece of purple cardstock and I cut this to be 7 inches by 7 1/4 inches. When you fold it in half, you actually need to do it where it's folded on the 7-inch side of the cardstock. The stamp that we're going to be using today is the Sweet Poppy Lily stamp. This one is SPS TMP Iris, and I think I said lily, but it's actually an iris. I'm sorry about that. Then we're going to be using a sentiment stamp down here at the bottom. And I have one that just says happiness blooms from within. We'll also be using the Lavinia stencil called Laurel. This one is ST 008. The inks that we're going to be using today will be 2 of the VersaFine Clair. One is Nocturne and one is Monarch. We'll also be using some of the Tim Holtz Distress inks. We'll be using Seedless Preserves, Villainous Potion, Pine Needles, and Mowed Lawn. We'll also go ahead and use just a little bit of some black soot for some shadowing effects. We'll be using some of the blending brushes as well as a paintbrush to paint the color in on our little white squares. We'll also going to be using some dimensionals. Those are what I will be using underneath our little white squares that we're going to be creating to give it just a little bit of unique appearance. Okay, so let's take a look at how we're going to do this card. So the first thing that we're going to do is work on the base card. So we will take our larger piece, which is the 6 3/4 inches by 3 inches piece, and we will go ahead and blend our colors on that. I'm going to go ahead and use my stamping platform. So the first thing that we will do is go ahead and just take our piece of cardstock and put it on the stamping platform. And then place our stamp in the middle and just line it up so that you've got about the same amount of space at the top and the bottom. So we're taking our iris stamp and we're going to actually stamp that in the Monarch, which is a purple color. So we'll ink up our stamp really well with the Monarch. And try and press down evenly across your entire stamp so that you get full contact with your cardstock underneath, so that we can get a nice crisp image. There we go. That's really nice. We'll go ahead and remove it from our stamping platform. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take a piece of baby wipe and clean this off, because we're going to be using black on this stamp here in just a moment. So I want to go ahead and clean off the purple. And we'll remove our stamp and set it aside to use it a few minutes. Now we're going to take our cardstock that we have stamped on, and we're going to use our seedless preserves first. And we're going to actually cover up the entire surface with our blending of the seedless preserves. Okay, once we have our seedless preserves layered on our card, we are going to take our Laurel stencil, and I actually like to tape mine down so that it doesn't wiggle while I'm trying to do my stenciling. So I just take a little piece of painter's tape and just stick it to the back and then down to my work surface. Then I lay my stencil over that and then go ahead and just stabilize it with a little piece of tape as well. Now what we're going to do is take the Villainous Potion, which is a little bit darker purple, and a blending brush, and we're just going to blend around the outside edge of our design. We don't want to have that go over it. We just kind of want it to be around the outside edges. Alright, and then when we remove our stencil, we see that our iris is highlighted in the middle of the card there. So we will set that aside, and we can now remove our little piece of stabilizing tape from the back. And at this point, we can go ahead and set this piece aside so that we can work on doing our smaller pieces. So now we're going to take our smaller scrap size piece, set this one aside. We will grab our stamping platform once again. And we will repeat the same process we did before, except this time we are going to use black ink. Now this does not have to be precise where you place it on your piece of scrap paper, because this is what we're going to cut out our little squares from. And this time we're going to take our black get our stamp inked up really well. Again, so that we can get a nice crisp image. Again, I like to make sure that I'm pressing down completely on the entire stamp to get a good crisp image. And then we will remove that piece from our stamping platform. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to paint our colors in on this particular piece of card scrap. So I'm going to use the same colors that I used in the background. We'll start out with our seedless preserves. We're going to grab just a little bit of water, and I'm just going to squirt some down there, and then I'm going to take my seedless preserves and just rub a little ink on my work surface. I'll zoom in just a little bit so we can get a little bit clearer shot. Bigger image there for you to see. So then I'm going to take my paintbrush, which I think has fallen down. Let's see where I put the paintbrush. Alright, I'm going to stop my video so I can see if I can find my paintbrush, and then we will start painting our project. Alright, got my paintbrush. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip it into the water that I sprayed on the surface here, and then pick up just a little bit of the ink. And then we're going to start out by just doing a base coat over our iris. Alright, now that we have the lighter color, which is the seedless preserves, we're going to go to our villainous potion, and we're going to fill in and give some depth and some shading to it. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe up my surface here so that we can spray some fresh water down and use the villainous potion to get a little bit of shadowing. Again, I just put a little bit of the ink from the ink pad onto my glass work surface along with some water, and pick up that ink, and then we're just going to add that darker purple there. To highlight and shadow our iris. Once you get some of that highlighting in, go ahead and go back and just take a little bit of that purple and go along some of the lines that you see on the iris with that villainous potion, just to give it a little bit more highlight, make it stand out a little bit where those darker marks are. Alright, so that just gives it just a little bit more dimension. Now I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush out pretty thoroughly as we switch color themes. And you can either take it to the sink and wash it out, or just put a little bit of water, spray some water onto the brush and onto the paper towel, and you can wipe out the color pretty easily. Now what I think I'm going to do, because irises a lot of time have a little bit of white in the center. I've kind of left it a little bit lighter, but I'm going to go ahead and take a white ink. I am waiting on my white PanPastel to arrive, so I don't have that to use, but I am just going to take my paintbrush and dab it in my white ink pad and just highlight a little bit of the center. Where you usually see a little bit of the white on the irises. Okay, now we are ready to move on to the green color of our iris. Let me get this one, white one, put away, and we'll move on to that. Again, I'm going to clean off my brush. And I'm going to clean up my work surface. We'll spray that down so we can get it nice and clean, and we'll move on to our green. So we'll start out with the mowed lawn, which is the lighter green, to put down our base color. Again, a little water on our work surface, a little ink from the ink pad. And we'll put down our lighter base color on the leaves and the stems. So now that we have our lighter color of green, we're going to go in and do the same thing that we did with a little bit darker green and give it a little bit of depth and shadowing. So we will take our pine needles and do the same thing. I'm going to wipe up this lighter green, put down some of the darker green, and then we will go in and create our shadows and get a little bit of depth here. One of the nice things about most of these stamps is you can see where there's darker, like spots on it. That kind of indicates the shadowing areas. So you can just take your color and kind of add it into those areas. So that you don't have to necessarily guess where you need to add it, because the stamp gives you a bit of a guide there. Okay, so there we now have painted in on our scrap card, where we will now go ahead and do the cutting out for our pieces of the squares to go on top of our card. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to cut out the center of our flowers into 1 1/4 inch squares. But what we need to do is, as we're cutting it out, we need to leave 1/8 of an inch in between the pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out by cutting my strip to 1 1/4 inches. And I've just got this cutter here that I'm going to go ahead and use. Let me go ahead and zoom this out just a little bit. I'm going to wipe up my ink so that I don't end up sticking my elbow or placing my card down in that. So we're going to wipe that up. And then we're going to kind of determine where the center is going to be. So looking at this, and I might actually try and grab a ruler here real quick just to show you. So we're going to look at our design here, and on about 1 1/4 inches. So I'm going to say it's somewhere right around in this range. So I'm going to take this, lay it on my cutter, and I'm going to cut one side off. Then I'm going to measure out. Let's see, I'm going to turn this over so I can get my inches here figured out. So 1 inch is going to be right here. So I'm wanting to go to 1 1/4 inches. So I'm going to put my edge over to the side. Oops. 1 1/4 inches. Going to line that up the best that I can there. And then we're going to cut. So now I have got my 1 1/4 inch strip. But what I want to do is figure out where I want this top of my first piece to go. And I think I want about 1/4 inch. So I'm going to line this up for about 1/4 inch. And I've got that. Now this comes to the part where we want to be a little more precise. So we need 1 1/4 inch piece. So I'm going to take this, line it up to my 1 1/4 inch piece. And cut that. So now I've got my first 1 1/4 inch piece. Now what I want to do is I need to have my 1/8 of an inch in between. So I'm going to take my cardstock and move it down so that I have about 1/8 of an inch. That's going to be trimmed off. Get that down a little bit more so you can see it. Let's see if we can't zoom that in so you can get an idea. If you can see where my cutting line is. So I'm going to line this up. Trim off my 1/8 of an inch. And now I'm going to cut my next 1 1/4 inch down. So I've got this space in between with that cut out. So now I'm going to go ahead and continue doing that for the other 2 pieces. I have my pieces with the 1/8 of an inch in between each one. All right, so now let's go ahead and start putting our card together. Now I do want to go ahead and put my sentiment stamp on to my base card first before I start adding any kind of layers or anything. That way we can be sure that we don't have to mess with using any stamping blocks or anything like that. It just makes it a little bit easier if we can use the stamping platform. So I'll place this down, and then I'm going to put my Happiness Blooms from Within just right down here in the right hand corner. I'm going to use the Monarch ink again. And I got that just a little bit dirty, so let's take a piece of paper towel. So we don't want ink to get in the wrong place on our card. All right, and there is our sentiment on the card. So now let's go ahead and start putting it together. So the first thing that we're going to do is place our art card onto our frame. And I'm just using a little bit of adhesive running tape. You can use the running tape, or you can use just some paper glue. Whatever works the best for you. Pardon my head if it gets in the way here. I just want to make sure that I get this lined up properly on the card base, the frame. And now we're ready to go ahead and add that to our card base. Same process. Alright, so now we've got this all on there, and it's time to go ahead and put our squares on. And I'm going to go ahead and use the dimensionals so that they pop up just a little bit, giving it just a little bit more interest. So now we're going to take this first piece and we're going to line it up so that it matches over the top of our image that we stamped on the base card. Make sure we get it just right. and press that down. And there's our first one. And now we'll move on to the second piece. If you don't want to use as many dimensionals as I am, that will be your choice to do, but I just like to make sure that it's pretty stable. So I don't mind using one in each corner to help it with that stability. All right, and again, this is going to end up being just about 1/8 of an inch in between. Line that up on top. And now for our last piece. All right. And there is our finished card. I want to thank you for watching my video tutorial today. I hope that you have enjoyed this layered look to the iris that we've made on our card here. Please be sure to check out the delbellosdesigns.com website and look at the design team page so that you can see more of the tutorials that we have for you. I hope you have a great day.